I never dreamed that I would meet some of the people I have met along the way in doing this show. And it's because I have been making connections and networking. It is very interesting the way that one connection with one person can lead you to other connections with other people. This is a big part of how I get really great guests on my podcast. It's about networking and making connections and forming relationships. And that's why my partner, Renee V, and I have decided to put on an amazing day of networking and exposure to thought leaders in the personal and professional development industry. We're holding the Rich Thinking Conference September 6th in Philadelphia, PA. It's a whole day event that includes breakfast, lunch, and just unbelievable access to people who you never dreamed that you would be up close and personal with. You'd be able to talk to, connect, shake hands, get together, make plans, make connections with people who can help you to get where you want to go in life. This is the way it's done. It is no nonsense. It's a lot of people will just BS you and not give you the real deal about how they have gotten success in their lives. And I'm telling you, this is one of the things you need to do. You need to network. You need to get into the right rooms. You need to take the time, make the investment in networking events, live events, in person. It's amazing. It's the way to go. And we would love to see you in this room, give you a big hug, and let you know that you are doing something amazing for yourself. You can get more information by going to richthinking.org. We still have some seats available as of the publishing of this episode. And so get in there now because they're going fast. The date is coming up. All right, guys, take my word for it. I am no gatekeeper. I want everybody to win. And this is how you win, by getting in the right rooms. I've created that room for you, I'm not getting anything out of this other than the joy, the satisfaction, and to be quite honest, the connections I'm going to make by being there. It's crazy. We would love to see you there. You can get your tickets at richthinking.org or just contact me and I'll hook you up with the tickets. And now on to this great episode of Blessings. Welcome to another episode of the Blessings podcast, everyone. Today I have with me a beautiful young lady, Amber Ybarra. Amber loves construction, and she's taken her talents in the world of building construction and applied the concepts to our personal construction, which I love. The things that are making us who we are, our identities. And so she wants us to see that we can thrive. And she has a formula to help us to all feel fulfilled as we access success. She is a best-selling author and a former signed Curves model who ran a $1 million construction company. And now she's taken her life experience to become a master mindset architect. I love that term. She's working in the business of building the best self that you can achieve through her Remodel You method. She's ambitious and wholehearted in her mission to spark positive change in individuals and in the world. Welcome, Amber, to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Mitzi. I'm excited to be here and have this conversation.
Yes. So a lot of your work centers around having a positive image of yourself and primarily your body image. And I love this. I have 2 daughters who are in their early 20s, and it's something that I think we all struggle. I struggle with it myself. And I think it's just an ongoing thing that a lot of people, even men, struggle with. It's not just exclusive to women. So when did you become interested in helping to shine a light on this topic? Was there a particular story that inspired your work?
Most definitely. And thanks for having this question, because it's so important to our mental health, honestly, to love ourselves and look at ourselves in a very kind way, right? So often we have these negative thought loops that just distract us from feeling our best and being our best. And for me, it goes all the way back to modeling, honestly. It's a wonderful industry. I love the fashion industry, don't get me wrong. But while I was a model, this was before Curves models. We actually used to be called plus size models. So if you were anything over a size 6, you were considered plus size. And I remember I was always the only plus size model in the room. A lot of it has to do with I'm Latina and I'm 5'10", which is pretty tall for a Latina. And so I got to go into a lot of the casting rooms, and you walk in with minimal clothing and people just nitpick every little thing about your body. And at first it was just interesting because I loved the end goal of it. I loved getting to walk on the runways. I loved shooting for commercials and like being on set and behind the scenes and making friends with all these other women and men that traveled the world. I come from a small town, and so it was so intriguing to me that this was actually a job for some people. And I did have a mentor who I didn't know was a mentor at the time, but when she took me under her wing, she really helped to prepare me as best as she could. Again, this is when I'm like 15 years old all the way up to 22, right? Because by 22, I felt old and like I was expiring out of the fashion industry, because most of the time they want you under that age. Of course, again, things have changed now, and I'm so happy that there's this movement with body positivity, because that wasn't it when I was in the industry back then. And I just remember thinking to myself, I had worked so hard for a few years that it was my only job. I did that in photography at the time. And I was up for the biggest audition of my life at that point. Vogue magazine called my agent, and they wanted me to potentially be on the cover because they were doing all ethnicities, all ages, and I was going to be the one plus size model that was Hispanic. And I go into the audition and I didn't get it because I was literally half an inch too thin, and they just needed me half an inch bigger. And they asked if I could gain that half an inch within like a month. And I just walked out of there and I felt so defeated. And then my cup size wasn't big enough. So could I get my cup size big enough? I don't know what that means. And I just remember walking out thinking to myself, I just want to build something that has nothing to do with what I look like and has everything to do with what's in here and in here. And if you're listening to this, I'm pointing to my mind and to my heart. I want to do something that's going to make me great money and that I'm going to enjoy, and that has nothing to do with what I look like. And to me, that was a really big turning point, because we're so much more than our bodies. And no one really told me that when I was growing up, because I was at such a young, impressionable age in my teens in this industry that was very cutthroat. And it was one of the best decisions I made. And I could probably go back into it now and be so much better. But when you're a teenager and under the age of 21 in that world, it was definitely a lot to take on. And I wasn't prepared in my mentality for it at the time.
Did you think it was going to be just glamorous and fun? And was that why you went into it? I used to get 17 magazine when I was a teenager, and I loved that. Oh my gosh, I would pore over the pages and look at the models, and I'm 5'2", and I was never going to be a model on my best day. So I was, and that actually, it's the same thing. It's like, why can't someone who's short be beautiful? It's so interesting that you're judged by these measurements, like
literal measurements. 100%.
Crazy.
Yeah. Honestly, the only reason I got into it initially was, and I'll be really honest, it took a while to actually feel beautiful. I thought this is a great way to, one, get out of my small hometown. And two, I'd always had a dream to travel, but my parents, I'm only third generation in America. And my parents and my grandparents, I literally grew up in the house that my grandparents had. No one ever moved out of my hometown, and my parents never traveled, never even spoke about travel. The dream when I was a kid was always just Disneyland, and that would be so big because it was in a different state. And I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, this thing's going to take me all over the world. And I've never seen any of that. So it was my opportunity really to travel is why I got into it, thinking that it was going to be easy. Okay, well, if I could get away with this putting on makeup thing and walk in high heels and have this personality, and eventually got into pageants, and you learn to be very poised and speak to other people in conversations that were very adult for my age. And it took on a life of its own. But yeah, never did I think it would be like how it was, like entrepreneurship, to be honest.
Oh boy. Don't get me started on that. Whoa.
Yup.
Yes, it's crazy. I think what's interesting about it to me is that you saw something that looked like a dream life. And that's what we do when we're trying to establish a vision for our future. We look at something that seems like, wow, it would be so awesome if I could live that kind of a life. And you went for it. And then you found out, which as many of us do with entrepreneurship as well, is that it's not quite, the grass isn't as green maybe as it looks. There's a price to be paid, or there are consequences. And it's interesting to look at life that way. What do you think about that idea that there is some exchange, like you have to give something to get something? What do you think about that in that world?
It's one of those, it's choose your hard, right?
Mm-hmm,
Like
mm-hmm.
it's, yes, it's hard to get up and go to the gym and do the thing, but it's also really hard to not treat your body and then to be unhealthy and go to doctor's appointments. And I say that because that could be a very unsexy thing, because we want to think of entrepreneurship or the fashion industry as this glitz and glamour and travel around the world and all these fun things. But the truth is, when you're really in it and you're working that hard, sometimes you're traveling around the world and not even seeing it, because you're in
Mm.
conference rooms and you're on stages and you're doing all these things. And so to me, it's more of a choose your hard. I really learned from modeling that I'm like, if this isn't easy, sure as heck, everything else isn't going to be, because that's the most glamorous job you could probably think of. That's very not, just not glamorous at all. So it's the same with entrepreneurship.
Hmm. Yeah, I definitely went through this when I started being an entrepreneur, which has only been like 2 years ago. I was in academics up until that point. And when I
Mhm.
started working for myself instead of for somebody else, and I got into this world where I could see that things were happening that were a little sketchy sometimes. And I was a little disillusioned by that. And I think that that probably happens in every industry, that it's not quite what it looks like on the outside. And that's what modeling is doing, is trying to present a picture of people as something they're not. And we have to remember that.
Very, yes. And it's also retouched. And I didn't realize how negative of an impact it could make to younger men and women, right? It's this beauty standard that's so hard to hit. And I really love being in the space that I'm in now, because what I'm doing now is more about positive messaging. And that just wasn't the case with what I used to do. And again, don't get me wrong, I love fashion. Even though I'm in construction, I'm a girly girl. I love to wear the lipstick. I was in like my yearbook for wearing high heels to school. Like I love heels, right? But we could feel and be beautiful without all that too. And I love getting to talk more about mindset and the things I'm creating in the world, writing books, reading books, getting educated. That's something that I have a goal to continue doing.
Yeah, it's so important for you to be doing that, especially if you're speaking to a younger audience, because right now in this world that we live in, every teenager, every even elementary school child has access to a filter that makes them look like that model on the cover of Vogue in an instant.
Mhm.
And they don't ever have to feel the sense of needing to be comfortable in their own body if they don't want to. And that's has really far-reaching consequences, because you're going to hit a point at some area of your life, some point in your life where you're going to be confronted with the need to self-evaluate and to develop self-esteem and self-worth and to feel finally that you belong in your own body. It's just crazy.
And I love that you use the word self esteem, because that is very different than your self confidence. Self confidence, you could switch it on and you could switch it off. But when you're building that self esteem, it's something that is within you. It's not to put on a show for anyone, it's not to be confident for a moment or on a stage, but it really is all about that self esteem building. And again, that goes back to the mindset, because you can really be unbreakable when people on the internet say mean things to you, about you, criticize the things that you're trying to do in the world, right? That's honestly the majority of the reason why most people don't show up like they can.
Mm.
Their potential of building, even building a brand, being online. Why?
Yeah.
Because somewhere deep down, a lot of us are very afraid still of showing our truest self to the world. Because what
Yeah.
if they don't like me? What if I'm not
Mhm.
good enough? What if I'm not pretty enough? And so when you build that self-esteem, then you realize the only person you need permission from is yourself.
That's so true. I love the parallels between modeling and entrepreneurship. I never thought of it that
Yeah.
way. Maybe I am somehow vicariously modeling.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting to think of it that way, though, because putting yourself out there, and that is one of the hardest things that I had to realize in entrepreneurship, is that now I am the brand. Before I started this business, I was just a regular person on social media. I had no brand. And now it's a whole different ballgame. And when people are building something and they know they're meant for more, they have something to say in the world, they have a message that's powerful, but there's something holding them back from expressing it. And like you said, that's the fear of putting themselves out there. So what kind of advice do you give people to help them to overcome that fear and just go for it? Not worry about the haters. Who cares? You're always going to have haters.
Exactly. Again, honestly, I think you said the perfect word. Building, how are you working to build your self-esteem? When you're building that self-esteem and that self-confidence, first, you're keeping promises to yourself. If you tell yourself that you're something as simple as you're going to time block, show up for a podcast, right? How many times do you find yourself, you're making plans with a friend or you're going to go on this trip, and then you just want to find a reason to not do the thing you said you wanted to do? It's so important to stick to those things because then you're building this like rapport with your own self. You're saying, oh my gosh, even though I didn't feel like it at the moment, I'm going to do this thing because I said I would.
Mm.
And so then when you say yes and you move through that discomfort, when the bigger things pop up and happen that feel hard or uncomfortable, and you step into it and you do it anyway, then that begins to slowly build on your confidence, your self-esteem, and also just when you begin to catch momentum, when you take that first step and you begin to see and feel how good it actually is to put yourself out there because it's fun. Guys, this is supposed to be fun. If you're an entrepreneur listening to this, it's not supposed to feel hard at all. If it feels hard right now for you to put yourself out into the world, building your brand, social media wise, it's probably because you feel like you have to perform or you feel like you have to be the version of yourself that you think other people need you to be versus actually just being you.
Yep.
Because a lot of what's on the internet is just a scam, to be honest.
Yes.
Of course, we're not sharing every vulnerable moment. Of course, you don't know every single failure. And to be honest, if you're a great entrepreneur, you're probably failing every freaking week. And that's okay because you're doing different things. You're making cold calls. You're hearing no all the time. Those are just stepping stones to the success that you see, those people that you actually admire online. They have that because of those failures and because of those no's. So don't think that just because someone has a nice, shiny picture or the beautiful family or traveling across the world, like maybe you want to right now, again, it's like the modeling industry. You see the glitz and glam of it, you see the retouched version. But to
Right.
get there takes a certain mentality. But in short, to answer the question, I feel like building the self-confidence and taking that first step to gain momentum is how you can start. Just begin with what
Yeah.
you have now as you
Yeah.
are.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're enough. You're always enough just as you are. You're exactly as you're meant to be. And it's interesting you say about that the online is a scam. It made me think whenever I see someone putting something out there that's over the top, let's say they do a photo shoot with their partner, and
Mhm.
I'm always like, oh, they're going to break up soon. You can see that when someone is trying too hard, it's not authentic. So I love what you said about being you. And I love this saying, be more you. Just be
Mhm.
more you. And the wonderful thing about that is that even if some people in your life fall away, that is okay. And it can be painful, but it is okay because you are now falling into alignment with the things that are going to take you to the next level. I just read this morning and it was so beautiful. It said, I'm paraphrasing, it was something like, when you can learn to take a redirection from the universe, as a sign that you need to aim higher, then you know that you're doing well.
Yes.
That's a sign that you need to aim higher.
Yep.
Yeah,
I
I thought that
love
was
that
great.
so much because I feel like we all have this idea in our head of what our life should look like and should be like and what we're working for. And yeah, when you, like you just said, Mitzi, a curveball is thrown at you and then you allow yourself to flow, to be in flow with it. It doesn't mean that you're not going to get to your goal. It just means it may happen in a way much more different than you had first imagined. And that's okay too.
Yeah. Yeah. I had someone on the show, Michael Lopez, and he said to me that he did not really love vision boards. And we've all been taught we'll make a vision board. And I love vision boards. I think they're great. But what he was saying is he was just cautioning that if you set your aim as one particular thing, then you're closing yourself off to something even better. And then it can also create a discouragement for you. If you don't attain that, you put that Cartier watch on your your vision board and you don't have it yet, you can feel bad about that for a long time, not having. And I think we need to just remain open to the gifts and the beautiful things that are coming and notice that they're there because they're all are there. And anyone, no matter what your circumstances, you can look around and see a little miracle right now.
Yeah.
They're always there. Yeah. So
100%.
yeah, I'd love to go back a little bit to your story, your upbringing and your family story. You just said that you were third generation in the United States. And how do you think that I find that a lot of people who have immigrated, my mom immigrated here from another country, and I find that people who immigrate to the United States, and actually we've probably all immigrated at one point,
At one
everyone,
point.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? But just in the short term, there's something about the drive, the grit, the work ethic that I think is a characteristic of people who come here wanting to make it. Like they come here wanting to just be successful. Like everyone wants to be successful, but there's a sense of complacency for people who maybe don't have that same level of like determination. Did you find there was anything like that going on in your family that is behind your drive?
Oh, 100%. It's the story of the person that, and I know this is a crazy example, but stick with me for 2 seconds. The person that has the alcoholic father. And then it's that story of the two brothers. And then they ask the one brother, why are you an alcoholic? Well, my dad was. And the other brother, they ask, why don't you drink? Because my dad was an alcoholic, right? So
Yeah.
to me, my version of that story comes from low being in like a lower class growing up. I've hearing stories from my mom how they couldn't even afford shoes. Like kids would make fun of my mom at school because she had holes in her shoes because my grandparents didn't have a lot of money. There were times where our electricity was cut when I was a kid. That was back in the day where you could have the door open and only have the screen door open. And then we'd have the Texas breeze just going through the house. And back when you didn't have to lock your doors all the time.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking, I know my parents did their best. I don't know how I would have parented when I was 16, 17 years old. My parents dropped out of high school to have me.
Wow.
And
Wow.
it was interesting to me because it was so important for them that I went to college because to them that was successful.
Yeah.
And so when I made the choice not to, it was very disappointing to them. And I remember telling them, I'm going to leave and I'm going to do something so good with my life. You're going to be so proud. And they are. And it feels really good. I don't know why that gets me emotional. Oh my God.
I'm crying too. I have tears in my eyes too, because that's amazing. And oh my God, you said so many things there that are meaningful. Sharing the story about your parents being so young when they had you, it's amazing. And they knew that they knew you were like the hope that they
Yeah.
needed. Like they weren't doing it themselves at that moment. Probably they are now. At that moment, it was just a different time for them. And they knew that you were going to go. Just such a beautiful thing to bring forth a child that is going to just even just do something beautiful in the world. I think we all have that hope for our children, but you're actually doing it. And also the idea that more practical sense of that you do not need to go to college to be successful. And I taught college. I was a college professor for over 25 years. And I'm the first one to say,
amazing. You are amazing. That's so awesome. I love that you have that academic background. And if it feels right for you, do it. I'm not against college. I tried 2 different times and I dropped out both times. And
Yeah.
by the way, I was an A plus student. Okay. But let me tell you, I worked harder than I had 2 of my friends that graduated early with me. They could just take tests and ace them and not barely study. And I'm just like, how do you do that? And I had friends that would help me, but I was never naturally great at school. And I
Yeah.
thought, if I'm going to work this hard for something, I want it to be something I enjoy. And
Yeah.
I did. I tried every single thing out there. I was a hair and makeup artist. I was a photographer. I did modeling, construction. I finally found the thing I want to do for the rest of my life, but it's taken me to till 36 years old to find it. And but yeah, going back to just my parents, I think that it's important, especially if there's someone young listening to this, don't do things just to people please, whether that's your
Mm.
parents, anyone in your family, because then you're going to spend a big chunk of your life working towards something that doesn't light your heart on fire. And eventually you're going to have that awakening in that moment. At least I hope you do, that you're going to question every single decision you made because it wasn't for you, it was for other people. And that's something that I'm happy I actually got right, because I get a lot of things very wrong. And I'm happy that is the one thing I got right, is that even though it disappointed them at the time, now they could be like, I'm so proud of you and I'm happy. I've been in business 11 years in construction now. I started the
Wow.
company at 24.
Oh,
So it's over that. Gosh, I don't even know the math anymore. It's over a decade that I've been a woman in construction, entrepreneur, shifted this last year and a half to be a coach and speaker. And they're proud of me now, but sometimes you don't feel it and you don't see it when you're in it. So just give yourself some grace and time if you're working to build something new. I can't imagine how difficult it was for you to make that transition. You were in something you had known so long, you were obviously great at, and then you took this sharp turn and pivot. And it's like you got to get to know yourself all over again. And then
yeah.
you think you know the world, and then you realize you really don't, because you now you're stepping into this venture that you've never done before, and it could feel really difficult. And the only way you're getting through those times is when you actually love what you're doing. It has to be more than the money. It has to be more than the Rolex watch on the vision board. Like I,
Right.
I think that's why I love vision boards so much too, because most of the things I have on there, it is about how I want to feel. It's about legacy creating. It's more than things. I've had a taste of money as a person who's come not from it. And I just love that I had the upbringing that I did, because I know that money isn't what turns my light switch on. It's never about that. Of course, I want to make good money. I want to retire my parents. I want to be
Mm.
able to help my little brother who lives in California with his wife. And I want to do bigger, greater things to help other people. And yes, you have to be financially secure for that. But when you're fighting the good fight, it has to be for more.
Yes, it does. There has to be a bigger vision. And I believe it has to be tied to some kind of service to the world. And I think most entrepreneurs and most of the people I know, they do have that sense. They want to do something that is going to change the world or help people to be better in some
Yeah.
way. And that's the wonderful thing about it. And yeah, I think if you need a specific certification, something like this, college
Huh?
is great. But these days, there's so much more to be explored. And
Mhm.
it's not like a path that you like. There was a time that like your parents thought going to college was success. And my parents thought the same thing. And I thought the same thing. And it's interesting. But the idea too, that I love the idea that you're talking about making pivots in your life. And I've made pivots many times. I'm 57 and I just made a major pivot 2 years ago when I started this show, started to become an entrepreneur instead of working for an institution. And
Yeah.
I felt like for me, it was just a natural transition because I'm a teacher still. I'm just a teacher in the school of life now. And that
Yes.
I can reach more people this way, which I love. But I think that's what we all want. But there are people out there who are unhappy with what they're doing and they want to make a pivot. So what do you say to those people to help them when they want to make a big transition or they know it's time for a change?
I love this because I've made so many transitions and pivots in my life, especially the one that I just had 2 years ago, where I hit this number of years that I've been in construction. And I thought, if something happens to me in a year, if something were to come down and tell me, hey, you only have 1 year to live, would I want to go out of this world as a woman in construction? Would I be okay? Would I feel like I accomplished everything I needed to do in this lifetime? That was a hard no.
Mm,
Hard no.
yeah.
And so, what I would tell people, it's something that a dear mentor of mine told me, who you know, is he's the one that told me that it's okay to build in parallel. And
Yes.
so much of the time, people are like, and don't get me wrong, I love people like Tony Robbins and stuff, and I've burned the boats many times over again, but don't feel like you have to completely quit your job and then make it in the next 30 days. And like, things take time to build. Building a brand, building a new business, selling a product. You also there's this point where a lot of people don't talk about, but it's that learning point where you
Mm,
go down the rabbit hole of just working to be great at what you're doing, which takes time. So if you're in the middle of a pivot or transition, allow yourself time and grace. Let yourself be creative by feeling secure and knowing that you have the means to pay for that roof over your head and all the things that make you feel safe in your life, which is keeping that job you have. And guess what? Now's the time to cut out the things that aren't serving you. The Netflix binge watching, the partying and hanging out with friends. Hopefully, if you're over 22, you're not doing that anymore anyway. And get rid of all those things that are time vampires, right? Just sucking
mm-hmm.
the time out of you, because those hours can be used to build what you want to grow and what you want to change. Because let me tell you, when you're in the middle of struggle and you see that bank account depleting because you're going all in on the one thing, that's not going to allow you to be your most creative self. Believe me, I've been there. Okay. I have been there. And by the grace of God, it worked somehow, but I do not wish it upon anyone to try to build something when they're in this sense of desperation, or you need a client, or you need anything. So
Mm-hmm.
build in parallel, but make the step. Make sure you have a community around you of people that are like-minded,
Yeah.
right? You don't have to hard cut people out of your life, but if there are certain people that just drain your energy, or are maybe still in a party mode and you're trying to not be, and people are making you feel bad for working on yourself, there's this amazing thing I learned not until the age of 30 called boundaries that are really hard to keep. And look into those, set some boundaries, and realize that you may think you have time to do what you love, and you really don't. Before you know it, that time's going by. You're turning 30, you're turning 40, you're turning 70. And then you're like, oh yeah, that one dream I had, that one thing I wanted to do.
Mm.
And what a shame if you get to that point and you didn't even try.
It's so true. Yeah, what you said about the letting go of people who aren't going to be able to come with you to the next level. The idea of going out and partying, I recently, this is kind of part of my whole transition story, but people who have followed my story know this. You don't know this, but I had actually like a health condition that kind of triggered my pivot. And I knew that I needed to pivot, but I think the universe will hit you over the head with something. If you're not listening and it's time, it will hit you over the head and you'll be forced to make that change. But when that happened, there were a lot of people who fell away from my life. And when I went into a different direction, that was extremely hard for me in the moment. But now I can look back and say that it was for the best. And Mel Robbins said this, and a lot of people jumped on this bandwagon. I love this. She says, if, just as an example, if someone wants to go out and party, let them.
Mhm.
And if somebody it goes out to lunch, your friends go out to lunch and they don't invite you, let them. Just let
Mhm.
them. Let them go. Let them be. But yeah, the partying thing is interesting too. I think that there's a lot of talk about alcohol and cutting out alcohol. And it's definitely one of the things I had to cut out of my life. Going out was not really an option for me anymore. And I think maybe when you have to make the decision on your own, it's harder. How was that for you? What do you do with that? Do you drink? Do you not drink? How do
I
you handle
do.
like partying?
I enjoy wine.
Okay.
That's really the only thing I drink, to be honest. I don't do hard liquor or anything, but when I do, it's like when I'm cooking, because I'm a big
Oh,
cook at home person. I don't even go
oh,
out to eat a lot. Honestly, I love to home make all kinds of things. I love to try new recipes, and I'll have my wine out and I'll listen to music. And to be honest, I'm very much a homebody unless I am traveling for the things that I love to do. I'll tell you this much. I've been to Vegas probably 12 times in the last 2 years, and not once have I just gone and
went
like,
wild.
yeah, like I didn't go to a club. I didn't go to, gosh, I should really probably go to the pool sometime. Oh, yeah, I did go to a pool once, but it's usually for conferences and to grow and really business related. I think I've maybe put 50 cents in the slot machine just to say that I tried a slot machine in Las Vegas. But when I'm here, I really am, I work hard to be focused. When I'm here,
Mhm.
I'm really close to my parents, and my dad, especially. He's been very sick lately. He's had cancer for many years, and it's just like soaking in every single moment with him. And my mom lives an hour and a half away. So she comes over and comes to hang out, and it walks with my dog. Like those kinds of things make me happy. And it would be interesting. I've never tried to, I'm being fully transparent, to cut out alcohol forever. And I feel like right now you see so many people doing it,
I
and
know.
I'll have to look more into your story about why you had to, but you're really right. Some of the people that I admire and I look up to, like Lewis Howes,
Yeah.
right? Like Jen
Yeah.
Gottlieb and
Yeah.
her hubby Chris, they don't drink. And I really feel like it's for a reason, because you find yourself, and I've noticed this lately. So when I was in Europe probably 2 months ago. I was there for a month, living and working with some expats, some digital nomads. And yeah, when I came back, I had gotten sick for a week. And I just thought to myself, I was like, I definitely didn't drink a lot over there or anything like that. But I just found myself, when you're in a health crisis, you're like, what can I do to make sure that I'm fueling my body instead of dehydrating it or things like that? And so it has been a thought. And I'm
Yeah.
happy that you brought it up, because it's an
Yeah.
interesting conversation. It's an interesting topic.
I know it is. I totally didn't expect to even bring that up, but it's interesting because I think it is a movement right now. There's a lot of people talking about it. And yeah, for me, I don't know if I'll never have a drink again because I used to love having a glass of champagne and or like a glass of wine. I used to love that,
Mhm.
but I can't do it now and for health reasons. And I'm seeing more and more people talking about that as a something that holds you back. And
Yeah.
yeah, even though it's okay, I honestly don't think there's anything wrong with having a little alcohol for enjoyment or I love it. I remember doing that. But it's very interesting to think about it, to think about that whole topic. Yeah, it's an interesting movement that's going on right now, but okay, little side note there.
Yeah.
So
Hello?
you're going to be joining us for a conference that we're having. If you're listening to this before September 6th of 2024, you can get the opportunity to actually hear Amber live. And I'm so excited to have
So
you on the
excited.
stage with us because
Thank you.
your messaging and just your presence. I can't wait to meet you in person and give you, you're going to be
Yes,
surprised at how little I am.
I love it. You're
Because
gonna be surprised how gigantic, enormous. I'm just like, ah, and then I wear heels, and I'm like a 6'1" woman just meandering around.
I love it. I love it. I love it so much. It's so funny because you can't get a sense of that. That's why it's so important to get into the actual room with people because the energy is different. And I know that you have just fallen in love with public speaking. And it's just like when you go to a conference and you hear people speaking, like you have been inspired by other people, like I know Jen and her husband. And it's just like something special about being in the physical room that you can't get. It's not the same. If you saw Tony Robbins on your screen, not the same if you're going to go into the room with Tony Robbins. So that's
Yeah.
why we wanted to have this conference and bring inspiration to people in a way that you can only have in an in-person experience. So what do you think about that? What's the most exciting thing for you when you're speaking to a crowd?
Most exciting thing when I'm speaking to a crowd. Gosh, I've never been asked that. Honestly, I'm just so grateful to be there because I know what other speakers have done to move and inspire my life. And so just that feeling of, wow, how can I do my best so that I could touch that one Amber 5 years ago in the room?
Mm.
And it was so impactful for me that I just want to be that for other people. So just any opportunity to share my story and message, that's the reward. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's contagious. When you get into a room and you feel inspired by the speakers, it makes you want to do something in your own life. That's the whole point. It's
Yeah.
inspiring because it's meant to light a spark in the members of the audience so
Mhm.
that those people that are in the audience can then go out and do what you're doing, make a difference, pay it forward. It's a ripple effect and it's just never ending. It's so interesting. When you're speaking to a group, what are your favorite things to discuss?
I love to discuss what we talked about with pivots, right? I have this methodology in my coaching career that I work with business owners and entrepreneurs in called Remodel You. And really, how can we remodel your life? MODEL. How can we get that momentum? How can you observe, right? The other people that you look up to. How are you observing their habits and the things that they do so that you could put some of that into your own life? How are you daring to be greater for the
Mm.
D? The E, how are you checking your environment? Because that's the one of the biggest things about growing, like we talked about, with the people that fall away from your life and it could
Mhm.
feel hurtful, but maybe you've outgrown them.
Yep.
Maybe they've outgrown you and now you're inspired to step it up. And if I could stop there for a second and say, this is another reason why minimum I have one live event that I can go to every quarter, because those relationships, the friendships that you build with those people, correct me if I'm wrong, but they pretty much become your new family. They really
Yep.
do. I have so many, I swear I have so many best friends. I'm like, oh yeah, my best friend. And my mom's, I thought Rachel was your best friend. Yeah, she is too, but Letitia's also my best friend. It's like,
Mm.
I have best friends everywhere, okay? Because that's what happens when you're in a room like that of everyone wanting to be better and grow, is that you find those friendships and
Connect. It's
yeah,
like
you
little
deeper
synapses.
connection.
Yep, you make these super connections and you do. You have to, not to interrupt your role there, but that is so important to note that that was the one thing that I think helped me move the needle the most and kept me inspired was joining live groups, going to live events. So important. You cannot overstate how important that is. So what
100%.
so what about the L?
So the L, ooh, and I'll be getting more in depth with this methodology live on September 6th
6.
in Philly. I cannot
Yep.
wait. And the L is for leverage. So then how are
Mm.
you leveraging those relationships? How are you leveraging those new opportunities? Because what happens a lot of the time is most people go to a conference and then they're all hyped up and then they meet people and then they go back home and they fall into the same habits that kept them from moving the needle and what they're trying to grow and create in the world. And so leveraging that could look like being that person that DMs them on Instagram saying, hey, it was so, just wanted to follow up. It was so great to meet you. Here's a 15-minute calendar link. Like, I'd love to have a conversation to get to know you better because I've really connected with you at that conference. And then by the time you know it, you're talking and you're like, no way. I met this person at a conference and she's a speaker too. And now I have an opportunity and you came to mind because I remember you put in the extra effort to connect with me. By the time you know it, you're growing your network
Yeah.
and you're able to then leverage those relationships and potential opportunities to build your brand and to grow.
Yeah, because networking has to happen in person. Like you can do these online virtual networking events, they are not the same. You need to make physical contact. You need to be in the I'm very about the energy of things and I know that when I get around someone who feels that way that you can just tell that there's you feel the connection, you can tell the mindset, you can just feel like the energy around that is something that's going to lights something in you. It helps. And
Mhm.
it's actually connected to the brain, the neurons and the synapses that fire in your brain. It's
Mhm.
actually making that happen. And it's also affecting your hormone levels. It's a physical and a mental transformation that takes place. So this conference is called the Rich Thinking Conference. You can learn more about it at richthinking.org. But when you think about that phrase, rich thinking, and it doesn't necessarily mean just abundance, it means depth of thinking, really intense, like thinking about things, knowing what matters, and the self awareness that comes from that kind of deep thought. When you think about rich thinking, what comes to mind for you?
Top tier, living in your fullest potential, to activating your success.
Yeah. Activating your success. And that's what you do. You're the success architect. I love the idea of architecture because when we are moving to build momentum and create fulfillment and success in our lives, we have to think about the structure. We have to have the plans, the blueprints. Like you need to have all that. And one thing that I found recently in my own business is when I first started, I just took action. I just took the messy action. I tried a lot of different things to see what felt best and how I wanted to move ahead. And I didn't really know for sure what I was going to do from there, from the beginning. And now I have a much clearer picture because I took the action. So action comes first and then clarity comes next. Have you found that in your own work as well?
It's so true. And of course, you have to have an aim for something, right? You have to get some initial clarity of what you want the thing you're creating to look like, but you're never going to know 100%. So, yes, taking that messy action, that imperfect action, that's what's going to get you to the real clarity. Like I mentioned, with all the things that I've done, people used to tell me, "Gosh, you're a jack of all trades. What are you becoming a master at?" Guess
Yeah.
what I was mastering, I feel, was the most important thing most people don't do, which is dipping their toes into all these things so that you know what feels right. And I think that you did that wonderfully because you're right. You don't know what is in alignment until you're in that situation and you're filling all the opportunities out. And then you're like, oh, wow, this is the thing. I just know it.
Yeah. And you don't have to stick with something if you're not enjoying it. Like I know people who start, like, let's say you decide you want to start a membership or something like this. And
Mhm.
then you get into this membership situation and you're having to show up every week or whatever you decide that's going to look like. And
Mhm.
you discover that you do not enjoy that, that it's just not feeling good to you, but you've already committed to it. So that's why it's a good thing to have a little bit of a experimentation phase. If you have that beginning, you like you described in the beginning, you want to start here, but you're not quite sure where it's going to end up, then experimenting a little bit can be super beneficial to help you to gain clarity on what's actually working for you. Yeah.
1,000%. And just giving yourself the okay
Mm,
to just stop it. Cause I feel like there's a whole other different conversation to be had about when we're quitting something, we feel like a quitter or a failure when really it's the opposite. It's almost like when you're running a business, if you're not hiring quickly, but then firing just as quick, something's wrong. It's the same with some of the dreams you're chasing. If something's not working, you got to give yourself permission to not continue doing that thing and then to find something else and to change course, which is completely fine. And by the way, everyone else on the internet that you're maybe afraid to look like a failure in front of, they're worrying way more about themselves. So
that's
make sure
right.
that you do that for you and what's best for your life.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I remember when my kids were little, and I always had the mindset that they did not have to stick with something if they weren't enjoying it. Yes, if you join a team, you have to see it through for a certain amount of time. You don't want to let the team down. That's true. But if you join the Little League and you discover that you do not like baseball, it is okay for you to not play baseball anymore. Like, why would we force someone to? We don't want to do that. People do that to their children. And I don't think it's a good idea because then it teaches you later in life, like you're saying, that you think you have to continue something that you know isn't working. We stay in things way too long and we need to give ourselves permission to quit. That's a beautiful phrase, permission to quit.
Permission to quit.
Yeah, I love that.
I
So,
love
what
that.
would you say are some of the biggest lessons you've learned in your life? I know you have a wonderful book, and I read your book. Yes, give us the
Thriving into
title. It's
30. Thriving into 30.
Thriving into 30.
It's a
Yes.
30 things guide for the growth mindset girl.
Yes.
And I have made the wildest commitment. I'm actually putting a book out every 5 years. So I'm almost wrapped up with one that has to do with being 35. And yeah, and I'm going to do them when I'm 40, and I'm just going to continue it because I think it's important that more of us share and are transparent about our life's journey in the different ages, right? Especially for someone who's over 30. I'm 36 now, but again, one of those rules where who says I have to write it, publish it when I'm 35? I just think it's important to share that with people, especially as an entrepreneur, especially as a woman who is still single, never been married, doesn't have kids, right? Probably all the things that most people tell me I should do and have had, and just being open and honest about it, and sharing stories too about my friends who do have that and how wonderful it is for them, and just getting to know yourself better. So yeah, Thriving into 30 was published over 5 years ago. I honestly forget. Time
It was
just moves so
2020.
fast.
It's
There you
2020
go.
on there. Yep.
You
Because
know,
I looked
this
at
is
the
wild.
copyright. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, Thriving into 30 is the book.
Yeah, and it's a great book, and it has a list of things that reminded me of the question I'm asking you about the life
Yeah,
lessons. So
the life
from
lesson.
even from that book, or just from whatever is at the top of your mind, what
Yeah.
would you say is maybe the biggest lesson, or one or two big lessons you've learned?
Top two biggest lessons. One, the people in your life are going to make or break you. That is so true and so important. I've held on to different friendships and did certain things that I didn't want to do for a long time because I didn't want to hurt people's feelings, because I do care deeply. But I've been in this phase of, but I care about me more now, and not in a
Yes.
selfish way, but more in a selfless way. And so community is everything. The people that are around you it's everything. And two, the second thing is a fun one. And actually it has to do with chapter 22 in my book. And it's called If Travel Were a Love Language, something to the degree of that. And the second biggest life lesson is that to me, there's no better way to really know yourself better and more intimately, and expand your mind and challenge you in the best of ways, than to travel and to get out of your comfort zone physically. That's one of the big ones for me, is I want to continue to travel because I want to continue to learn more of other cultures and how other people live, so that I could take the pieces that inspire me to live a better life with the home that I'm making here in
Yeah.
America.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. And I would love to we'll have to talk a little bit more about your travel another time, because I love that aspect of what you do in your life, and how that's a priority for you. And I just want to ask you super quick, when you are traveling and you're traveling alone, what are your big tips for safety and for maintaining your confidence and sense of
Yeah.
security as you're doing that?
Of course, common knowledge isn't always common practice. So
Mm.
practicing the common knowledge things, like not going and staying out really late, not walking home by yourself late at night if you're going out, or to a late dinner, knowing when to take an Uber versus having to take the metro at certain times, especially as a woman that I traveled by myself most of the time. This last European trip, I actually met friends there, but I was in between Portugal and Paris, and in Paris by myself for a few days before I reconnected with friends there, and then went back to Spain. And so that would be the thing, is just that common knowledge. Also, just doing your research before. I already felt safe because I know that Portugal is honestly one of the safest countries. And specifically where I was staying, they speak a lot of English. So that was really nice. And also knowing, last thing I'll say is some basic pieces of their language, so that it's more of a respect thing. And when you're entering a place, knowing what to say in Portuguese or French or Spanish is always helpful.
I think that's really important. Good tips. Yes. I did some traveling around Europe by myself as well. And I did all of those things. And it's really exciting to be able to do that. It does feel sometimes scary, but it is really exciting. And it does teach you a lot about yourself. And as we've talked about throughout the show, I think what we've alluded to and haven't really put words to is self-awareness is
Mhm.
really, it's the master key to a lot of what we're after in life, particularly our success and our fulfillment and our joy and our ability to love and be generous and
I
share our
agree.
gifts. Yeah. So what's your biggest blessing in life?
I love that. Biggest blessing in life. Gosh, there's so many. Okay, one, I'd have to say my health. Yeah, because we're literally nothing without it. And I only get to do what I do because I've been blessed with the health that I have so far. And I'm working very hard every day to do what I need to do now so that I can continue to have that. And that's the biggest blessing for me.
Yes. Oh, I totally agree. Yeah, I think that's number one. Thank you so much, Amber. I've loved talking with you. And like I said, I cannot wait to see you and give you a big squeeze in September 6th, the Rich Thinking Conference.
Come join
um,
us.
I know, come join us. You want to be in this room. I'm telling you, it's going to be great energy. Anyway, but it's not about that right now. I want it to be about you and just thanking you and letting you know how much I appreciate you having this wonderful conversation with me. And yeah, we'll keep in touch, and it'll be so exciting to see.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.